The reason why we decided I would sit here is that everybody dressed in dark blue. Okay, so we're trying to be the sexy panel to talk about unsexy issues. The unsexy issue is supply chain. And basically what we want to do, and we're going to energize you with, is to leave you with the idea that there is a lot of innovation that we can do in supply chains that are better for people and better for the planet. A lot of the conversation here today is focusing on products. Easy, shiny, you can see it here. We're going to talk about the hard stuff, right? How do you bring people together to create different ways of working? So that's about supply chain. And the reason why it matters is that if you take an issue like food, for instance, changing the supply chain matters for our kids, for the planet. Mid-century, we'll have 9 billion people. It's 30% more than what we have now. Yet we still have 3 million children dying because they're undernourished. And we have the forest disappearing at an incredible rate. So if we don't find models and supply chains that help us bring the food where it's needed while preserving the forest, then we're going to fail. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. And we'll start with a professor to lay the lay of the land, to tell you how it works. It's Professor André Calmon from INSEAD, teaching technology and operations, thinking about supply chains all day long. So, Professor Calmon, tell us in simple terms you can use and you can make us understand what is a supply chain, what does that matter for the economy, and why changing them could matter for people and for the planet.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, thank you, Katell, for the invitation to be on this panel. It's a pleasure to be here. So just to start off, I actually think that supply chains are incredibly sexy. There's nothing non-sexy about supply chains. And basically, a supply chain is a set of processes, people, organization, the set of information that is used to match supply and demand. So for example, if you think about the supply chain of an orange, it goes all the way from Syngenta, maybe developing the seed, planting it in Brazil, transporting it to France, and selling it in Marché d'Aligue, which is near Station F. And specifically in food supply chains are at risk. So there's a lot of risk when you're producing food, right? There's variability in yields, there's seasonality in production, variability in prices. And on top of all of these things, climate change is really raising the boat of risk in every single step of this supply chain. And there's a huge demand for trying to change, to innovate the supply chain of food, right? We know nowadays what is the technology that we need to produce food in a more sustainable way and a larger scale. What we don't know is how to design the supply chain, the set of incentives, the set of steps that we can do this in scale. So I think there's a huge opportunity for innovation there.
And could you give us a very concrete example of when a supply chain works really well? It works to make money, and it works for livelihoods of people who are engaged and working around it, and it also works for the environment.
Yeah, so without trying to be too technical, a supply chain, I would say that an example of a supply chain that works would be, for example, some small co-ops of farmers that we see in places like Southeast Asia or Africa, where farmers are connected in a co-op. They have tools, for example, insurance, in order to be able to deal with risk of their production. And the food that they're selling and hopefully producing in a sustainable way is reaching consumers at a fair price that they need, right? And also, we're able to reduce waste. So it's a big thing in supply chains nowadays, and a huge space for innovation is thinking about closed-loop supply chains of circular economy. So a supply chain that would work is a supply chain that can maximize the recapture of value at the end of use of products.
Thanks, André. So that brings us then to our next sexy speaker in this sexy panel, and that's André is like, I should never have gone in that panel. You're coming next. So Hans Loth, he's working with Rabobank. That is the second largest bank in the Netherlands, is that correct?
Or the largest, I don't know.
Oh, the largest. That's, go check Wikipedia again. And Hans' job at Rabobank is to head the global partnership with the UN environment, with the United Nations agency that's taking care of the environment. So it's a bank working with the UN. So can you tell us why this exists, and can you tell us what this partnership looks like between a profitable bank and the do-gooders on the other side?
Yes, thank you, Katell, or tree huggers. I'll keep it very simple. The challenge that Katell described in the beginning lies to a large extent when you talk about food and agriculture at the primary sector, so the farmer level. We need to produce more because we have more and more people, and we need to do more sustainably so, i.e. we need to do more with less land, less arable land, because we're chopping away through the forest, which is the deforestation challenge that Katell alluded to. Unfortunately, the farmers are often deemed, sorry for the word, but it's a word, unbankable. It's difficult for banks to finance farmers because they are deemed risky. That means that innovation, sustainability is difficult to finance at that level. But that's where the challenges start. So we thought as Rabobank, being very active in food and agriculture, to support our commercial bank with donor funding, which we route through a fund. And we incorporate that together with UN Environment. So we complement donor, i.e. soft, cheaper money, with commercial money to enable financial solutions in the primary sector, farmer level, so they can actually produce more and more sustainably so.
So we all hear a lot, I mean, there's a big buzz, or there was a big buzz about microfinance, especially for the smallholder in poor countries who needs the money to produce more and produce more sustainably. So what's different between microfinance and the funding that you are providing them through that partnership?
Excellent question, Katell. I think there are two differences. The first one is that we don't directly lend to the smallholder, but we use aggregators. So that could be a company, that could be an NGO, that could be a cooperative. So we focus on larger groups to have more impact. The other difference is that we also include large farmers. So it's not only the small farmer, but also the large farmers that by design have lots of hectares, lots of impact. So if they want to grow into a more sustainable production, immediately lots of impact with one farmer. So we target both.
And just for the audience here today, can you tell us what could be in there for them if they want to be engaged in such project? How big is your partnership? How can people come and join to try to help develop these systems of farming that are different?
It's an open architecture fund, so everybody can join, first of all, with ideas and discussion and sharing. Because as we also discussed just now, we need lots of cohesion and scale. We need to scale this up. Otherwise, it will be a drop on a hot plate, although the fund has a starting capital of 1 billion, which is quite a lot. But if you look at the problems globally, it's not a lot.
I wanted you to say that number, however, because I tend to speak to people, and in particular to entrepreneurs.
Yeah, so it is 1 billion that we target as a start, but we want to grow more. And so we need to get as much as we can for this to have as much as possible impact as we can. Looking at the problems, 1 billion is quite humble. It sounds like a lot, but it's quite humble looking at the challenges.
Thank you. So we see with that example that it's basically a bank operating differently, right? And this then lends us to the third speaker of this sexy panel, who is André Hoffmann, who is not only the vice chairman of Roche, a pharmaceutical company, one of the largest pharmaceutical company in the world, but who is also the chairman of some foundations like the MAVA Foundation, or member of the board of foundation. And then someone who spends his life trying to bridge profit and non-profit. We just heard an example of a bank who's trying to integrate some classic non-profit activities in its model. What do you see in that space, André? Why do you think we need more of this?
Well, thank you very much, Katell. And first of all, let me say how excited I am to be here. It really is a buzzing place. It's a buzzing place to the point where you probably can't hear me, but we will try to sort of make it as eloquent and as noisy as possible. First of all, this notion of trying to compensate for the unattractivity of our title, so unattractivity of our discussion by putting sex into it has obviously failed, since everything is empty here, but I mean, we'll have to deal with that. What I wanted to underline here, and I heard the word do-gooder just before, is this notion that if we really want to make sure that the system works better, if you want to make sure that we repair what is clearly a fractured society, we're going to have to reinvent a number of the ways in which we do business. So in my mind, this notion of non-profit and for-profit is a wrong distinction. We need to be efficient, we need to be successful, and we really do need to be successful because the problems are piling up. And we also need to make sure that we run this in a professional manner. Now, the only distinction I can make between the profit and non-profit is that in the profit world, you measure success by financial returns. And in the rest of the world, we do not do that. I mean, I don't know how you live your daily lives, but I'm certainly not counting the money I make every day. I look about societal issues, I look about happiness, and I look about other soft factors which need to be integrated. So I think it's important to really understand that non-profit and for-profit should be blended and should be blended in the most efficient manner. So I think we're very lucky to have examples like Rabobank has just mentioned here. But if I can go on, I would imagine that what we really need to also look at is this notion of long-term success. How can we continue to be successful in the long term? Katell very kindly mentioned our family company, Hoffmann. We exist since 122 years. We have only been able to continue to survive because we adapted to new circumstances. We specialize in innovation, not only in products, but also into the way we bring these products to the patient, our ultimate beneficiary. And so this notion of innovation, this notion of constantly reinventing yourselves is something that we need to look at, and that will only happen at a systemic level. Maybe I'll just leave it at that for the time being.
Thanks. So that helps me go back to you then, André. If we're looking at system change, how can research help us there? Yeah. What can research tell us so that we move in that direction? Because this is the hard stuff. It's not about a new sexy product.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. And first of all, I completely agree with André Hoffmann on this call that we need systemic change. And the truth is that, and just to quickly add to that, we do have the technology to address some of the world's biggest problems. We know what policies we need, right? What we don't know is how to deploy these technologies, how to reconciliate policy with businesses, how can we change the economic systems that we have today, right, in order to sustain humanity in the long run. And this is our mission. I think this is our mission to the moon now, is to rethink how can we redesign our economic systems. And research is saying a few different things. So first of all, and I'd like to just quickly highlight two trends in supply chains. So one is this change in this old idea that innovation usually would come only from developed countries. It used to be that when we saw when entrepreneurs were going into Africa or South America, where I'm from, or Southeast Asia, they would try to translate models that would work or were hits in Europe or in the US to these contexts, which many times doesn't work. What we're seeing now is an emergence of very innovative business models that are tailored that are coming from developing countries. That are coming from the fact that these people have access to technology, to have access to innovations that could potentially not only disrupt emerging markets, but also disrupt the developed world. And I think the second big trend that is important in this idea of redesign of supply chains and economic systems is thinking about circular economy. Right, is this idea that we need to not think about our economy only in linear terms. I have my supplier, I have the person that I sell to, that's it. We need to think more long-term, think about the systems of our economy, and really think about how can we build systems that maximize the recapture of energy within the systems, reduce waste, maximize reuse, while minimizing the amount of energy that is lost. So I think these two areas are very promising.
Yeah, and let me just build a little bit on trying to take something that works somewhere that we weren't thinking of because of an old mindset, like taking what works in the north and bringing it to the south, because that's what we've done for many years, and try to build on that. Because a lot of the conversation we're having here is about changing mindsets, bringing people who typically don't work together to come together and design new solutions. Andre, do you want to give us some examples about, what you put your heart in or your investment in to try and contribute to this change of mindsets that we need in the way we look at key challenges, such as, bringing food for 9 billion people?
Well, I think that's where often this conversation goes from the very global, we need to be sustainable, to the very specific. I have spent the last 40 years of my life with a foot in two camps. I used to be vice president of WWF, the World Wide Fund for Nature, where we fought for biodiversity and fought for species for a long time. Still doing it, of course. But by the way, you can see the panda there if you want. Okay. And on the other side, I've been active into our family business, where we have given ourselves as a mission to innovate healthcare and to do today what the patient needs tomorrow. In both cases, you will notice this notion of long term. And I think this notion of family company has something to do with it. When I take decisions, or when we take decisions at the company, we think in a transgenerational way. We want the children of the children to be continuing to doing that. You can only do that with a sustainable system, and therefore we need to make sure that our value creation within the company comes not at the cost of some sector of society, but comes well, I'm sorry, the word fails there, in a sustainable manner. In other words, we need to make sure that everything we do is focused onto the long term.
And I was also trying to probe you to talk about this new institute that you help us found at INSEAD that's going to look at how to do that in an educational environment. So you want to talk about that a little bit?
Thank you very much, Katell. I'm sorry. Well, basically, we are starting something new. We're starting a new experience at INSEAD. We are trying to create an institute which we have called the Institute for Business, I get it right, the Global Institute of Business and Society, which is going to try to reconcile this notion of making a profit with society. Making a profit is not bad. I will go even further, it's probably good, because it keeps you in business. And if you're not in business, there is no point in having a social or environmental return. You can only do that if you survive. As I said before, the long term will only be justified if you can make a profit, and that's important to understand. So the Institute is going to use what we are just seeing on this panel today. Some cutting research by André, some good examples by Hans, how can we actually invent new ways of doing business which will allow us to continue to maximize the impact on the systems around the planet.
Thanks, André. So let me ask you...
Can I just finish? Because I realized that I forgot to say how we're going to do that. We're going to do that by changing the norms of business teaching. It is absolutely unacceptable that today people who graduate from business school only know how to make money. They should know about how to contribute to society. They should be net contributors to society. And this change now is so exciting specifically for that. We're talking about changing the world, and it needs a change, and it needs a change soon. Sorry, I just want to...
Thanks, André. Wait, it's all coming out now, yes. The transition to you now, I wanted to just... ask you a more personal question on the partnership that you're designing, because I see the actors coming together for what they're trying to achieve. Let me ask you, as traditionally a banker, right? That's your profession. What have you learned if we're thinking about changing mindsets? And how have you changed your banking practice by working with the UN environment? What have you learned there that you didn't know before and that you're trying to implement through that partnership for something bigger?
Well, that's an excellent question. It's also a difficult question, so I'm buying time here with complimenting you. But what we learned as a bank is with the partnership with UN Environment is exactly the point that André is also making, is that what traditionally seems to be not profitable for a bank to go into, which could be farming or long-term finance for farming, that with the right partners you can actually make a business model. And that sounds obvious from this suit that I'm in, but when you look at farmers or smallholders, that is not always a given, because parts of sending soft money to farmers is not profitable, and therefore it's not sustainable. And to take away from profitable, not profitable, it is only sustainable if it's a business model. And that's what we found out, understanding the supply chains, understanding the primary sector, the challenges where money can make a difference for innovation and sustainability. Producing more with less is technology, but also multi-stakeholder. And that's what we've learned teaming up with UN Environment.
Thanks. And does the research support that? Is there evidence that tell us that business and supply chains who also invest to try to make a positive social and environmental impact are also profitable? Or is it just for the enlightened few?
Well, there is evidence that there are business models, and we've seen business models that are profitable and have a positive impact. But I don't want to sound too negative, but the truth, and this we have a lot of research on, is that the vast majority of companies that say that they're doing CSR and sustainability initiatives are actually doing very little, right? They're doing nothing in the way of systemic change, right? So here we're very lucky to have two exceptions to that rule. Two companies that are in fact taking it into its DNA to do well by doing good, right? But so we do have research that in fact we're not going in the right direction, that most big companies are not doing the right thing. But we do have a few business models that are scaling in a profitable manner. All the companies that are in the Grameen organization, for example, is one example of that. So Grameen Phone, Grameen Bank, and so on and so forth. But I would say we need more research in this. I think this is a huge open field, right, that we're still, and where industry, frankly, is behind, but it's still a little bit ahead than academia in trying to identify what are the truly world-changing business models.
Thank you. So you see that our call here in this panel about unsexy thing, is to really leave you with the idea that in a forum like this, which is focusing on action, there is a lot of change that needs to happen for actions on systems and on supply chains, not just actions with the next gadget. And I'm just going to finish by asking, every one of you, if you want to tell us what excites you the most in what you're doing now, to entice everybody once more, all these entrepreneurs, to also come and try different kind of partnerships, try different kind of way of working together to help with more sustainable solution. Do you want to go first, André? I'm just looking at you.
Yeah,
I don't know why. Sorry. So you start.
Yeah. So I guess two things that excite me a lot is, one, the use of technology. The marginal cost of applying technology in supply chains has gone down massively. Right? We're seeing things like blockchain, which its application in supply chain is all about financing, all about reducing the marginal cost of of tracing products. So I think there's a huge amount of potential there to figure out how can we couple the technology with new business models. And the other one is thinking about regions in the world that are growing very fast, where a lot of people are coming out of poverty, and how can we scale, develop, and more importantly, scale business models in these places that are profitable, but are also sustainable, that leverage technology, that leverage data in a new and creative way. So I think these areas are very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you. Hans.
Yeah, I have a
Your
similar
inspirational line.
I have a similar answer to André's. What inspires me is the global perspective. Rabobank, UN Environment are global institutions. Last week I was in Brazil. Next week I'll be in Hong Kong talking about Asian challenges and solutions, leveraging best practices that can apply in Brazil, tailor-make it in Asia. That's what excites me, and that's where we can make a difference and really scale up.
Thank you, Hans. André.
Well, it's wonderful to have the last word. I just wanted...
I will have the last word,
I'm
don't
sorry,
worry.
sorry. I just wanted to perhaps leave one idea with you, because at these panels, of course, we know that to be effective, you need to go home with a take-home lesson, something that we will remember. I would like you to realize that business is a force for good. We cannot put on one side the people who repair the damage created by business. Business has been responsible for, in particular in environmental terms and probably also in social terms, an enormous amount of destruction since the beginning of the industrial age, and business will have to keep it right. Business will have to repair the damage done in the past. So business as a force for good will only happen if our companies become net contributors to society. We need to do better with less, and we need to start repairing the mess created before. I would like to just leave you one thought. It is not how you spend the money that matters, it's how you make it. And if you make the money responsibly, we would have much less opportunities, much less need, sorry, for the NGO world which is trying to repair the damage done. So all you budding entrepreneurs, make it sure that you include that into your models. You need to contribute to society.
And this is over. We're at 0. We've just been warned. But I was keeping my eye on André's daughter there, Alice, thinking about her, because what we're talking about here, if we want to make the world of Alice a better world, with businesses delivering not just for money, but also for good, this is what we're talking about. This is unsexy, but it's super important. At Rabobank, they're creating a partnership. At INSEAD, we're creating an institute to think about it. So we want to ask you, what is it you will be doing? And next year, coming back in a sexy session to take stock about what you'll be doing also on the world of supply chain and systems. Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists.